Alright, so we're checking out this 158 scale micro monster truck from LDARC. It's a ready to run. Comes with the controller and the vehicle itself. Get a bunch of other things in the box as well. Get a manual, a couple of different chassis if you want to switch out the one that's installed. USB-C cable for charging. Get some tools and some screws and nuts. And you get some stickers. So here's a quick look at the truck here. Well, I'm going to go over this in a little more detail, but very basic here in terms of the features. You got full suspension. You got suspension here in the back, brushed motor. You got some gears there, and then in the front you have independent suspension. So each wheel has its own spring, and then you have a servo here for the steering. You have proportional steering and proportional throttle on this model. And just compare scale here. This is a 176 scale from Turbo Racing. And this is what they're saying is a 158 scale monster truck. So obviously monster truck should be a lot bigger than a sedan. You do have some lights here in the front. I'll show you that here in a second. Also some lights here in the back. Got a on-off switch here and your USB-C port there for charging. Not exactly sure what the size of the battery is on here, but it says it does run for up to 40 minutes of runtime. And here's a look at the controller. Pretty standard trigger grip here, forward and reverse functions. Steering here, right-handed. And then you have a little screen here. I'll show you some details on that here in a second. You have your on-off button here, or on-off slider, and you have your USB-C port for charging. The battery is built in, and it doesn't say what it is. I think it's an 18650, but it's hidden underneath this. It's kind of screwed in, but it does come with a battery, and you can charge the battery inside the controller. All right, let's go ahead and turn everything on. Slide over this switch here. Got some lights, and it's blinking because it's not bound to the transmitter. Got to turn the transmitter on. Hear beep here. Lights turn solid, and you can see we have our steering control and throttle. The lights can be turned on and off via this switch here on the controller. It's this little blue light down. This is a toggle switch here, just turns it on and off. Might save a little bit of battery, but I didn't notice any difference. This button here also turns off the front lights if you hold it, but if you release it, the lights come back on, but the rear lights always stay on no matter what. You have some switches here for controlling your throttle trim and steering trim. It's these right here. So if it's not going straight, you want to adjust your steering trim here. And then the throttle trim is if you want to increase or reduce your throttle trim. If it's too much or too little, sometimes you want to go slower, you can adjust the throttle trim and control there with that switch here, and just hit up or down on this, and you get beep to indicate that you've actually done something. And then the C and the B here are for rates for throttle. So C is for throttle rate. So right now it's in the middle where it's white. If it's red, that's the advanced. And then if you go down, if it's green, that's beginner rates. So basically that means it'll go slower, medium speed, then high speed. Same thing here on B. For steering, you have basically it controls how much steering you have or how much it can turn or how quickly it can turn. So if you want less steering, for basically a little bit more precision control, you want green. White is middle, and then the advanced is basically it'll turn a lot. That's red. So let me see if I can show you that here. So this is red. That's how much you get. And then if you go to the middle, it looks about the same, and then if you go to the green, it's a little bit less. So not a whole lot in terms of the maximum steering rate here versus beginner and advanced. You can see it's a bit more, but it just means that the circle radius of the turning radius of the car is reduced, and that makes a difference in terms of basically when you're going really fast, and if you turn too quickly, if you turn the wheel too quickly, the car will flip over. And I found that, even with the lowest speed, so basically the lowest throttle and the lowest amount of steering, the car still turns over. It'll still flip over. So you can go into this menu here to adjust some of the settings. So you might be able to get a little bit more fine tuning if you go into the menu here and adjust some of the settings, but they're not documented in the manual that was included, so I'm not exactly sure how this works. I did try to play with it a little bit. So you can just long press this scroll wheel here to go into the settings, and you go into a model here, and here you can give it a name. There's a model number. So you can go to, like, for example, steering setting here. You can reverse that if you want. I'm not sure why you would want to do that. You can change the endpoint, and I did try to mess around with this and adjust the endpoint, but that didn't seem to make any difference. I'm not sure why, but you could adjust it here. You can also adjust the sub trim as well, because I found that the trim on here was, even with adjusting it via the button on here, it wasn't enough, so you had to go in here and add a lot of sub trim because it just seems like it's way off. So that at least fixed the steering problem I had initially. But yeah, I'm not sure why this isn't documented in the manual, but I think that there's probably a way to get in here, maybe under the perhaps advanced settings somewhere here. Anyway, so I just basically drove it around as is on the lowest settings for the most amount of control, and even the lowest settings is really fast, and it's got very you have to be very I guess careful when you're steering it around. You don't want to oversteer, because if you're going fast and you're oversteering, if you turn the wheel too quickly, it will cause the car to flip over. Other than that, if you're pretty careful about how you're doing your steering, it is fairly controllable. You can, pretty much do whatever you want with it. I just wish that the transmitter had some sort of an expo setting, which I couldn't find anywhere in the menu, where basically it will give you more precision in the middle, and so that you don't oversteer. I guess prevents you from oversteering is what I'm trying to say, and that doesn't seem like that's available on this transmitter and this firmware. So you just have to kind of learn to be a little bit more precise and a little more deliberate about how you're steering the car around. Other than that, it seems to run fine on most surfaces that are smooth, and not even some bumpy surfaces like the patio that I'm playing around with this on. However, when you try and go into some dirt or some sort of like off-road situations, this does not do so well. The wheels tend to spin and doesn't move around. Even though it's supposedly off-road with these big wheels, the problem is there's not enough clearance between the ground and the bottom of the chassis here, and that causes the wheels to spin when you're trying to go off-road. So this doesn't work very well off-road at all. You can kind of get through a little bit of bumps, but when you're trying to go through some dirt, rocks, that kind of stuff, it doesn't seem to do that well for this model because of the lack of ground clearance between the bottom of the chassis and the wheels. Either the wheels have to be a lot bigger to give you more ground clearance, which you could possibly upgrade the wheels to something bigger. Not exactly sure how you would do that. I'm sure some of your RC car experts out there probably already know a way. If you see that, there's probably a bushing there you could probably pop out and pop on a new wheel, something similar in width, but just a lot, like way bigger. Then I think we would be able to do some off-roading, but as it is right now, I wouldn't recommend it. But for like tabletop racing, little bit of bumps like that patio surface, it's going to be totally fine. I think that if you had a few of these, for your kids, they should have a really good time, racing these around on some smoother surfaces. But yeah, again, off-road, probably not recommended overall for this model. So last thing to note is that this does come in an FPV version. So in the manual, it does talk about this FPV version, and there's a VTX and all the stuff that there's some buttons on the transmitter for controlling the VTX. However, this is not the FPV version. As far as I know right now at the recording of this video, the FPV version isn't available on Makerfire yet. It might be later. Obviously, since it's all documented in the manual, it exists, and it should, it's basically a different top. It looks like a bus, and then there's a camera. So possible that they haven't produced it yet. I'm not sure why it's not on the Makerfire site yet, but maybe if that's the version, if you want this in FPV, that would probably just wait. This is an analog FPV camera, and that might come out later. I'll see. Yeah, if I find out later that they have this available on the Makerfire site in the FPV version, I'll put a note down in the video description that that is now available. But otherwise, it's just this regular version here without the FPV. However, knowing that it does come in an FPV version, it's probably pretty easy to just pop off this canopy, and there's probably a plug or something in there that I actually haven't been able to figure out how to pop off the canopy yet. It's probably a way to access the power, and you can probably just add your own FPV camera to this. And for most smooth surfaces and stuff, that it should be fine in terms of running it around. But again, off-road probably wouldn't work on this one here, even if it was FPV. Alright, so that's going to cover for this video. I'll put a link in the video description to this if you want to check it out. Got any questions, let me know. Talk to you guys in the next one.